Today I want to talk to you about the tall white aliens. And the reason for that is that when we look at what is going on in the disclosure community at the moment, we talk about the UAPs, the phenomena, and what has been denied or hidden, then I think we should look to the chronicles of James Charles Hall, wonderful books and documentaries about the tall white aliens. For me, the most important thing, and that's the reason why I'm actually here and talking to you, is not if they exist. I'm interested in what does this phenomena, the contact, do with the human being. I find it fascinating how he describes the moments of fear that didn't leave him even after 2 years of close contact. So our topic is the tall white aliens and what do they do with the viewer. The books of James Charles Hall, which I highly recommend, I read all of them, the Millennium Hospitality books. They describe him as coming back from the Vietnam War, and he was a weatherman. He was stationed in an airfield, and while living out there all alone in his weather shack with the job duty to go out there every day and night, and to bring up these balloons to get the weather wind measurements, he had the encounters with the tall white aliens. I think we have to look at the fact that James Charles Hall is an outstanding human being. And the reason why I'm saying this is that what he describes and what is very, very well documented is that I think 41 persons that were before him in the same job either fled the job or they gave false reports, or they just they had a nervous breakdown, and he was the first person who could really go through with what was demanded from him. And he says he could do it because with all he experienced and what he saw, he just went into denial. And I find this fascinating when we go now into the moments the experiences have, which are basically very similar. There is something we have no framework for, something that is completely new, that is not in our culture. And at the moment, especially in the Western society, there is no adjustment culture for that. There's just what we find on the internet or we read in some books, but there is not really a culture on how to integrate these experiences. Well, except like if we look to John Mack in his books like Passport to Cosmos or Jack Vallée, but there is not really a culture for integrating the moment of contact with the phenomena. So what he says when he encounters the tall whites is that they left him fear-struck, but every time he saw them, range for Harry or what he describes as the teacher, he describes a whole community of tall whites living out there next to human beings, acknowledged by the military, and being there for, I think he says something like 30,000 years. Long time, doing completely their own story and their own thing. And he describes the problem is that they're not negative, but the frequency is just so different that when a human being encounters them, it puts the human being under a high amount of stress. And he had this coping mechanism to deal with it, and that was just not to think about it for a moment, complete denial, and doing his job and focusing on micro tasks, going back to the shed, to his housing, just eating, sleeping, experiencing. So basically he put his mind in a peaceful state where he had the possibility from his framework to develop a picture or an opinion and then to integrate these encounters. And what he describes is that, let's dive a little bit into that. So obviously there are different communities of tall whites, which are very human-like, a little bit more skinny, much taller, and very white skin and white hair, a little bit more sparse hair than human beings have, larger eyes, blue eyes, almond-shaped eyes a little bit. And they just live there with their children. So their main focus is on the safety of the children. They have the famous tic-tac shaped UFOs. They belong to them. And they're necessarily not keen to get in contact with human beings. So they encounter them in that area, but they have no mission to educate them or to interact or to frighten them. They're just there doing their completely own agenda. And it seems that the military is aware of that, because Hall describes also that he went with his, superiors to meet them. So there's a very interesting moment. So that seems to be a public thing. But obviously, for example, the teacher, a female, goes with the children to explore the area. So they do what human children do. They play around. And Hall describes a moment where one of these children is running away and get kind of caught up in this, high sage bushes, which are very robust. And it seems that the tall whites, especially the children, in a way are physically fragile. So they're very suits, but they're fragile. So he encounters the child and he realizes what is going on, and he opens a pathway so the child can go back to the teacher. And he describes how he feels the tall whites around. He cannot necessarily see them, the others, as I remember, but he hears them because they make like a bird sound. Like they have a little bit the sound of a robin, he describes that. And Hall approaches the child like he would approach a human child. And he describes the goodwill and intention. So for him, it was logic to help this child. And he describes also that the teacher must have felt his positive intention towards the child. So she did not see him as threat to the child. And over the course of time, they have a lot of encounters. And he's always tense. He's always frightened, but he focuses, what I see, on his human approach. So how a good human would deal with the situation. And he very well acknowledges the superior state these beings are in, but he also tries to understand how they think and how they function. And by doing that, he gives himself time to digest the contact. What we can learn in the framework of Hall is that it's maybe not so much about the question, what is out there? It is the question if we're able, when we have encounters, to find a moment to process the encounter. And what we learn from him is that sometimes just simply denial can be a first help. And then doing something that is quite normal and just distracting yourself, and then slowly integrating the moment and finding the capacity and also the understanding that the frequency other beings might have, as he describes from the tall white, are not necessarily comfortable for human beings. It's just, and that it does not mean that it is something negative. It is just so, maybe for some species, so different than our frequency that we perceive it as shock. I specifically talk about what we learned from the context of the tall whites, but I ask myself, can we apply this in also maybe possible other moments we have as experiences, or for moments that are about to come when things get possibly more public? Could this be a framework? Not to name it, not to label it in the first moment, just to observe and to observe the own reaction and establish something that gives us a human moment to deal with it. Thanks for watching, and I see you in the next video.